Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Marla Kaplowitz, President and CEO of the 4As. And joining me is my colleague, Molly Rosen. I'll have her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Molly Rosen with the 4As. I am the EVP of Member Engagement and Development. And our host, Avi Savar, who is on mute.
I am back.
There we go.
That was the most bizarre Zoom interaction I've had in quite a while. Everybody, sorry for the technical difficulties here. Hopefully you guys can see me and you can see the screen. So awesome. Thanks everybody for joining today. I am thrilled to be co-hosting this webinar with our dear friends at the 4As. Molly, Marla, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We got some fun content to go through today, and why don't we just kind of kick it off? So the first thing I thought it'd be good to do is just set up a little bit of an understanding of what Suzy is, and all the data that you're going to be seeing in the presentation today is derived from our platform, Suzy, which is a real-time market research platform used by brands to understand consumer sentiment, behavior, understanding. And in the last several weeks since the beginning of this crisis, we launched something we call the COVID Hub, which you can find at suzy.com/COVID. There you can sign up for our newsletter and get up-to-the-minute information. We're continuously testing and running questions with to get the pulse of consumers in real time. And we're posting and publishing on that hub every single day. The results of the study that you're about to get walked through will be published there. You will also all receive an email with a copy of the deck, as well as the webcast that you're about to see. So don't worry about taking notes. Just sit back and enjoy the content. The study was conducted about a week ago or so, the first week of the month, with a sample of just over 1,000 people, and weighted average census representative across age, gender, ethnicity, and region, all US consumers. Okay, so everything that you see here is from that. The theme for today across the board is kind of what can you do now that will pay off later? There's a lot of talk and activity around kind of branded content, advertising. What should you be talking about? How should you be interacting with consumers today? Do you even have a right to advertise? And if so, how do you do it authentically? And we believe that in fact now is absolutely the time to be advertising. The question is how, and we'll walk you through some themes and some data that will hopefully guide you a little bit in terms of the things that you should be thinking about today that will eventually pay off as we start to kind of come out of this crisis into arguably a kind of a new world order, if you will. The reality is, 214 million Americans, about 65% of consumers are still locked up at home, right? They are under self-quarantine, they are socially distancing themselves, and that's creating, certain new paradigms. And as we start to kind of loosen the reins, my feeling is like, we're developing new habits and new behaviors right now. It takes, 66 days to develop a new habit. And when we come out of this quarantine, we'll be, several months in. And I think all of us are starting to kind of think about our daily routines and understand some of the things that we haven't been able to do, that we're going to be able to do. And as we release, I think we'll all come out of this, hopefully going back to some of the norms, but I think we'll all be somewhat changed in a permanent way going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means as well. So in terms of behaviors and choices and things that were being impacted by, there were like three key areas that surfaced in our research. An increased focus on health, right? And that's not just about your fitness routine. That's about, hygiene and how you sanitize and the products that you use and what and how we think about our interactions with each other on a regular basis. So that's kind of one theme and one area that I believe, going into the new world order post-crisis will be permanently altered. The idea of conscious consumption. We are much more aware of the products we're buying, who we're buying them from, where they're being sourced from, how they end up at our doorstep, who's delivering them. And that changes a little bit of the relationship we have with certain brands. And understanding that nuance, I think, is going to be very, very important. We're also seeing a pretty dramatic shift to local, meaning we're supporting our local businesses. We're understanding now, who our neighbors are, how we're interacting with our community. All that stuff is being impacted pretty dramatically, and the likelihood is we'll continue to be like that going forward. Okay, 60% of consumers are consuming more content, right? Obviously, there's less for us to do. We're not going out to bars, restaurants. We are kind of confined in our homes, in our living rooms. And content is an escape for people, whether it's content to keep us informed, whether it's content to kind of, for a moment, lose sight of where you are and escape. We are consuming more content than ever before. These images, my team pulled them. I love the visual. They're from the World Economic Forum's website, and you can just kind of see by generation the types of content that folks are gravitating towards. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I urge you to kind of check it out. Obviously, boomers are watching more TV. Gen Z is gravitating more towards gaming. Gen X is kind of all over the map. So, we're all kind of going back to certain comfort zones in terms of the way we consume content. And we're also experimenting with new types of content, which I think is fascinating. 75% of people believe that brands should be advertising the same amount, if not more today, right? So consumers are expecting to hear from brands. They want to hear from brands. It's actually a source of information for them. The question is, how? With what tone? With what information? How do you present yourself? That's the kind of million-dollar question, and hopefully we'll get into some of those nuances in a moment. And almost 60% of consumers are still likely to be influenced by brands during this crisis. So not only do they expect to hear from you, but they're also expecting to kind of be motivated by you and moved by you in some capacity, right? So you have a voice, you have the ability to kind of move the needle. Again, the question is, how do you do it? There are 4 key areas that we've identified through this research that we think are opportunities to be able to build relationships with consumers now that will pay dividends later. Those 4 areas, kind of, some of it are like getting back to basics, right, in terms of our marketing best practices. But the idea of kind of reintroducing ourselves to our consumers and getting to know them, right? You guys have probably spent years and years and lots of money developing personas. Well, you could probably throw those personas mostly out the window at this point, or at the very least, think about updating them, because the behaviors and patterns that we're going to have coming out of this are going to forever alter a lot of consumer mindsets. And so really don't take anything for granted, and understand that, like, it's time to reintroduce yourself to your consumer and really understand who they are again. Then when you're putting content out into the world, like, what are they looking for? How are you informing them? And the way by which you inform consumers will also leave lasting impressions and allow you to develop longer term relationships. And then you got to walk the walk. It's one thing to say, you care. It's another thing to show that you care. And how you do that is critically important. And then when you're creating your content, make sure you understand what purpose it serves and how you're informing, how you're creating utility, how you're helping and driving value in the eyes of your consumers. That's going to be a critical part of moving forward as well. So getting to know the new consumer, that's kind of our first section. And we're going to do something new that we've kind of never really tried before. Suzy's a real-time platform, and we're going to do a segment called Ask America. So we're trying to kind of do some interactive polling, and as part of this, we want to know, what do you want to know? So we've loaded some questions up into Suzy. You're going to tell us what you want us to ask Suzy. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to share the results with you. Each section of this presentation is going to have a series of questions that you'll get to vote on. So the first item up for bids is getting to know your consumers. So we'd love to know from you. And as long as I don't screw this up, hopefully I will launch the poll properly. We want to know, which of the following questions would you like us to ask? How much has COVID-19 changed your buying habits? How much has COVID-19 changed your daily emotions? How much do you think COVID-19 will impact your values, and how much do you think COVID-19 will change your daily motivations? So the poll is live now. Please cast your vote. Again, we're going to do this at every section break, and then we're going to share the results with the audience at the end of the presentation before we get to some Q&A. Okay. So I'm going to let that poll run for a few more seconds. Votes are coming in. Thank you very much. Got over, about 273 people on the webinar, almost 170 votes so far. So I'm going to continue here while you guys are launching the question. See if I can get that. Okay, cool. So 65% of consumers believe that COVID has impacted what they care about. And I want to zoom in on that word care, right? Hang on, I'm going to share the results here real quick with you. So the question that you wanted us to ask is, how much has COVID changed your daily habits? So we're going to launch that for you, and we'll come back to the answers in a little bit. Okay, so as I was saying, 65% of people believe that COVID has impacted what they care about. And I think that's an important nuance, the word care, because what we care about impacts our behavior and what we do. Right? And if the things that we care about have been impacted, our family, our relationships, where we live, how we live, the things that we care about have been disrupted, that means coming out of this and going into kind of the new world, the behaviors that we display are also going to be different. One thing that I think is interesting to point out is this kind of idea that folks are flocking out of cities. Now, by no means do I think, cities are dead. But I do think it is important to point out that every one of us, myself included, has likely reconsidered or at least evaluated their current situation. I live in Manhattan with my family. I don't anticipate us leaving Manhattan. And at the same time, I can't lie and say that we haven't had conversations inside of my household about, should we leave? Right? That conversation has happened, and the likelihood is we're not going to. But the fact that we're even talking about it, to me, is pretty dramatic. My wife is born and bred New Yorker. She would never leave Manhattan. For the first time in my 20 years of marriage, she's considering it and has thought about it. And at the end of the day, like, you can't argue with what it means for us to live in a highly dense population with something like this surrounding us. So everything's being impacted across the board, and every one of us is looking at how we're living our lives and what we want to change going forward and what impact it might have. 72% of consumers say that they did not feel that advertising accurately represents the world they live in before COVID. Right. So we were kind of a little off in relevancy before this all happened. Imagine now what's happening. And I am still shocked that I am seeing the same advertising from certain brands that were running before the crisis still running. Some brands, many brands, have updated their messaging, obviously, and have tried to act in real time. We'll get into some of examples of that in a little bit. But a good portion of brands are still running the same stuff. And if it wasn't relevant before, it's certainly not going to be relevant now. And so now is the time to be rethinking how you're connecting, what your messaging is, and what you should be talking about. Because only 12% of consumers want advertising that is business as usual. They don't want to hear the same thing from you. They're seeing their world impacted. They're seeing their daily routines impacted. And they want you to understand who they are, what they're thinking about, and how you can better their lives, right? They want to see advertising that reflects their current world. They are currently social distancing. So showing people in large groups, showing people walking down the street, it's just tone deaf, right? They want to see people at home with their families having a good time. They want to see people enjoying the weather outside while social distancing, right? They want to see people working together with their children at home. So everybody's lives have been uprooted, and we're all kind of now living the same type of routine in many ways, which binds us together. And the brands that are understanding those nuances, and the brands that are empathetic in the way that they're articulating their message, are the ones that are going to leave lasting impressions.
That's great. Thanks, Avi. And I think you bring up a really good point about how brands should be behaving right now. And one of the challenges is that we are now going from a situation where everyone was home to some people will be at home and some people will not. And so figuring that out is another element that marketers need to consider, but it comes back to understanding people. You have to know who you're reaching, who your audience is. And if you don't have a purpose, you need to find one, or you need to be reconnecting with it. It's more important than ever. Emotions are quite high. People need to feel that they're being understood and that they're being heard, especially given just the anxiety that people are feeling today. And the next slide shows a great example of that with Oscar Mayer. And I don't know how many of you saw this, but this was just actually during the time of the research that was done at the beginning of May, where Oscar Mayer actually wanted to acknowledge social distancing and take something that was very common, a backyard barbecue, and kind of flip that and say, what if it's now in the front yard, but you can connect with your neighbors, but still do it in a responsible way where you're socially distancing. But then they took an action. I think this is important. It's not just about selling your brand. It's really more important to show what actions you're taking to help people today. And so what they did was they offered a meal every time someone used the hashtag front yard cookout. In addition to donating 1 million meals to Feeding America, they would add up to another 1 million meals. So it's just a great example of staying relevant to consumers.
And so I think this is another great example of this. And as a working mom with a young child who is now being homeschooled, I can definitely relate to the necessity of this. But Movo, a wine spritzer brand, I think came up with a great way of acknowledging the new reality that we're all living in when it came to Mother's Day, and not treating it as another Mother's Day as usual with close family gatherings and flowers for mom. Rather, it recognized the fact that many of us are wearing many hats at once. We're having the joy of relearning math, which was supposed to be immutable, but apparently I need to learn how to add and subtract, which is a joy. And obviously having your kids photobomb with you is always fun when you're doing a Zoom meeting. But as a result, they saw a need, and they created a 1-800 Scream for Wine hotline for mothers, where they could call in, vent in a judgment-free zone, and release some of that frustration, stress to a sympathetic ear. And I think, to Marla's point earlier, this is a great example of a brand not only really understanding what their consumer is feeling and coming up with great messaging, but actually doing something to help. So it's been a great action.
Amazing, amazing, and very creative.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at the end of the day, it's no surprise that, brands want to hear from you, and in certain categories, they want to hear, more. Obviously food, grocery, and pharma and general kind of healthcare brands, obviously, need to have a louder voice. And then all the way down to kind of, maybe not so much luxury, but at the end of the day, every brand has the ability to connect, and you can just see here, like, they want to hear from entertainment brands, they want to hear from gaming brands across the board. So clearly everybody's got a role to play.
But obviously not every brand necessarily is a necessity right now, or feels like it has a major role to play. But I think if you still think about what your consumer needs, what your community needs, there's going to be opportunities for brands. And if you go to the next slide, I think we have a really nice example of that. So many brands have reimagined how they can deploy their assets to come up with something new. And so this image is from Fort Worth, Texas, and it is the Texas Whiskey Company, a distillery that has retooled their factories to actually create hand sanitizers. So a great way for them to contribute to the greater good and help the community. And I think this also represents, not every brand is going to have the opportunity to retool a factory this way, but it's an opportunity for agencies to really help brands to rethink how can they use the assets that they have in a new way to help their consumers and the community around them in this moment.
Yeah. So again, so creative. You can just see how different organizations are stepping up, trying to think about how they can serve, right? And those are the brands that are going to leave lasting impressions, and over time are going to bring loyalty, are going to build loyalty and favorable recognition. Going into the next section, kind of the what to know and how to feel, and I want to launch the next Ask America poll. So the questions that you can choose from: what information do you most want from brands? What information do you least want from brands? Which channel do you go to for information? And which brands have been most informative? So please, take a second, cast your vote. And we'll launch these questions in Suzy and reveal the answers at the end. So we'll keep going here.
Okay, so we talked earlier about the type of messages that brands were putting out. And in the beginning, brands were really limited with their production options. And it was really challenging to find the right tone. So what you saw were a lot of brands adopted a similar approach. And someone recognized this about a month in and actually pulled together a video about 3.5 minutes that stitched together all the ads. And if you didn't think they all sounded alike after you watched this video, you knew they were all alike. Cue the somber piano music, to now more than ever, to we're all in this together and we're here to help you. So what you have to be careful of is not falling into the sea of sameness, but also you've got people that are really dealing with some emotional challenges right now. And you cannot assume that everyone is in this together, because the truth is it's not equal for everyone, especially when you look at the unemployment numbers right now. So you have to be sensitive to what some people are or are not going through during this time. And even if you look at the next slide, you'll see the response to this. I mean, look at how consumers were reacting. This wasn't just advertising people reacting, because they will also have their own opinions. This is about how people are feeling when they see this. They don't want to be told how to feel or to have an emotional bond with a brand. And for me, the ad that really has resonated the most with me, and I know we're not showing it here, but I do think it's important, is the Frito-Lay ad, because we said earlier it's about people. And that ad just stripped down to, if it is about people and it's not about brands, which is what it communicates, it's about actions. And they showed the actions that they are taking to help with donations and food and really address the issues that are happening right now in our country. And then just a simple reminder of it's about people. And so I know we've got a question out there of what ads do you also feel are resonating well? So please feel free to respond.
Great. Yeah, it's funny. A friend of mine posted on Facebook just a funny quote, and he said, I can't wait for times to be precedented again, right? Because every ad you see is like in unprecedented times, in uncertain times, and I think we are all yearning for a little more certainty and maybe more precedented times than unprecedented. Yeah. Cool. So rather than we had a bunch of kind of open-ended quotes we wanted to show you. And instead kind of summarize them, because so many people are saying the same thing, which is basically like, you don't need to sell me anything right now. Like I probably don't even have money to pay my rent, right? Or, and so, the question becomes like, how can you add value? And really focusing in on, what I've been saying this my whole career is like, focus on people stories, not product stories, right? What are the people stories that you can connect with and share, and how can you add value? And let's forget about your features and benefits for a little while, right? And if you can focus in with an empathetic ear, you may be able to connect in a deeper way, in a more authentic way with consumers. And, for better or for worse, we're seeing lots of brands pull back, and maybe this is, the time to lean in instead of pulling back. A third of advertisers have canceled campaigns as a result of the crisis, and half of advertisers have kind of delayed. So like it makes sense, obviously, if your messaging is not appropriate, you're going to pull that stuff out, right? But does that mean you should be kind of sitting on the sidelines and waiting? Or should you be leaning in and thinking about what messaging you should recraft and how your brand can actually fit in an authentic and relevant way into the people stories that are top of mind with consumers that are living their lives today? And so it's something to certainly think about. Because 61% of the consumers we surveyed, they want brands to talk about how they could be helpful. They want to hear from you. They want your ideas. They want your thoughts, right? They're yearning for any help they can get. They're yearning for escape from their reality. They're yearning for utility. And that really is an opportunity, right? In a very, very meaningful way. I think Winston Churchill initially said it, but I think Rahm Emanuel is more famous for quoting the saying that never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And it gives you the opportunity to do things you've never been able to do before. And this is that moment. Right? This is that moment to be able to kind of lean in and add value and leverage this crisis and make the best out of a pretty crappy situation. right? And what do they want, right? The question is, when you talk to them, what do they want? How do they want it? And this is what they listed. They want you to be informative. They want you to be honest, right? They want you to be authentic and comforting, clear, caring, dependable, community focused, and least thought-provoking, right? I mean, I think our thoughts have already been provoked pretty dramatically at this point. I don't know if we need any more of that in these uncertain times. But at the end of the day, you know, one thing came very clear through this research and through this study is they don't want you to be silent, right? They want you to actually engage, and the way that you do it is everything ultimately, right? 88% of the people we surveyed trust brand information, right? If not more now than before in regards to COVID. So, you know, I think, you know, for better or for worse, we're living in somewhat polarized times, and where we get our information, you know, the algorithm that delivers our information is one thing. And I think we're all looking for different sources of information that we feel we can trust and that we can, you know, kind of leverage for our own benefit. And so you can see here, I mean, 88% is a pretty resounding number.
This is a great example of helping people get information and also staying true to who your brand is. So any of you who've used Zappos knows they have amazing customer service, and they recognize that people were not necessarily looking for shoes these days, especially if you're spending a lot more time at home. So they decided to take their stellar reputation for customer service and use it not just to find products on their own site, but to be a real service to people, to their customers, to help them find anything they wanted. That included everything from Thai noodle takeout to 10-pound weights to someone calling from New York at Mount Sinai Hospital looking for more PPE, literally anything. They had over 1,000 calls, and what it did was really reassure people that Zappos was there to help their customers for whatever they needed, especially during this time.
And so this is, I think, also another interesting example. So hotels.com, obviously part of the industry that has just been decimated through the crisis with everybody staying home. And they decided to use this as an opportunity to help spread that message. So you see their mascot, Captain Obvious. He puts on some hand sanitizer. He very sadly sits down in his chair all alone and starts eating his little sad popcorn. And the text comes up that he's going to be social distancing for a while, and you should too. And I think, you know, they also changed their tagline to be from "Be there, do that, get rewarded" to the public health sentiment of "Just stay home." And I think this was a great opportunity for the brand whose entire livelihood depends on people not staying home to show that they are responsible corporate citizens, to put the greater good before their own needs, and to be there with their customers. So a nice example of a brand using its equity to demonstrate some empathy and its values.
Yeah, and arguably a brand that, you know, you would think, like, you know, doesn't have anything to do right now, meaning like they're shut down, right? And it's an example of like, you can sit on the sidelines and wait it out, or you can figure out how to stay relevant and stay top of mind and add value. And I think it's a great example of that.
Exactly. But obviously not every brand is going to have a budget, and not every brand is going to have a way that it can actually help in this moment. And so, you know, this is a time where I think brands also really have to assess what is their role and do they have one. And if they don't, then it could be better to just stay on the sideline and to not do anything. But that doesn't mean doing absolutely nothing. Obviously, they need to make sure that they're leveraging their own media channels, that those channels are reflecting the environment tonally, that they're on point, et cetera. But again, this is not a moment for every brand to just jump in with platitudes. If you don't have a role to play, maybe take a step back.
So our next section is walking the walk, right? And we're going to ask another poll question here. And this one is about how brands should do what they do and how they should walk the walk, right? So take a second, cast your vote. What do you want brands to do more of? What do you want brands to do less of? What brands in particular have done a good job? What brands in particular have done a bad job? And again, we'll share these results at the end. Cool. So conscious consumption. You know, I think we've been, as a nation, as a society, we've kind of been trending in this direction, right? I think, you know, the brands that are resonating with us, you know, over the last few years have been the brands that are giving back. And I think now more than ever before, that has catapulted into the mainstream, right? We want to understand where our products are coming from. We want to understand how they're being delivered and what these brands stand for, that we are kind of putting our hard-earned money towards. And you know, this quote is a pretty cool one, where it says, you know, kind of, consumers increasingly vote with their dollars for companies and brands that align with their values. So, you know, you may not be as a brand going through an election, but you kind of are in some respects, right? People are putting their money where their mouth is, and now more than ever, they're putting their money where their values are, right? And that's an important thing to understand in your messaging and your tone, and how you think about going to market. Is the values of your brand are more important than they've ever been before. And being able to share them in an authentic way is arguably, you know, that much more important. 33% of consumers said that they would go back to brands they previously used before COVID, right? And so this to me just screamed for an opportunity, like a conquest opportunity, right? It's like, this is the time for you to be able to put a stake in the ground and let consumers understand why you over the others, because they're in a moment where they're making different decisions, right? Routines are being disrupted, patterns are changing, behaviors are evolving. You know, I'll give you one example, you know, for better or for worse, you know, when this crisis kind of first, you know, became, you know, world news and top of mind, it probably took 36 hours before all the Method soap was replaced by Dial antibacterial in the house, right? Like, you know, and you know, that's, it's an interesting example, because as a brand, Method aligns to our values, and we kind of shifted away from the older brand, right? And now we've moved back towards, you know, kind of the brand that's going to have the most utility in our bathroom, right? That's going to protect us the most. And so we kind of jokingly say, like, what's old is new again, right? So like, am I going to buy the organic stuff, or am I going to buy the stuff that's going to basically obliterate the virus from my countertops? Maybe there's a way to kind of blend both, but right now is a time where people are completely open to new things and new ways of living their lives based on the experiences that they're having today. And so there's opportunities to kind of take advantage of that. Store brands are surging, right? 15% year-over-year growth during the crisis for store brands. That's coming as a result of a couple of things. One, availability. Right? What's in stock is also determining behavior, right? So supply chain issues may actually have an impact in brand recognition and brand loyalty over time. So making sure that you have ways to kind of deliver your products and services. But at the end of the day, right, there's opportunities for new brands to emerge, and there will be new brands that come out of this as new category leaders. 73%, again, this is a big number, right? 73% of consumers say that they're willing to shop with brands that do the right thing, right? And what does that mean? It's what we've been saying. It's brands that align to their values. It's brands that they feel are helping to improve their lives and the lives of others. And so as you start to think about, you know, your messaging, it's not about features and benefits. It's not about product stories. It's about people stories.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as you said, obviously it's about brands that are walking the walk and putting their money where their mouth is. So to your point, what are the actions that brands are taking? And luckily there's been a number of really good examples that we're seeing out there. And so this is an example from Daily Harvest, which is a brand that has donated thousands of their frozen smoothies and bowls to help frontline workers. And they are continuing to do this. They've started it in earlier March, and they're going to keep doing it while hospital systems remain in crisis mode. They also, so I'm a bit of a Neil Patrick Harris fan, so I particularly like this example, but they partnered with him to do a bingo night virtually. And, you know, while they gave away flatbreads to all the winners, more importantly, they donated 400,000 meals to City Harvest. So helping people who are suffering with food instability as a result of the crisis. Another great example is on the other slide. And this is Hershey's. So Hershey's has already been planning to do a collaboration with DC Comics featuring superheroes on their product. What's different this time, though, is they took this opportunity to not put their product on shelf, to not just let it sell out and reap the profits, and rather they are giving their very first batch of the product to the real heroes that we have today, the frontline workers, right? So they're sending pallets of chocolate candy bars all around the country to hospitals, police departments, fire departments, to help them and to support them as the heroes that they are. And I think both of these are great examples of brands really showing that they care about more than just sales. And that's what customers and consumers are really looking for brands to do in this time.
Yeah.
And brands can do more than just donating product or even money. It's about how you leverage creativity. And so this next example, I think, really shows that. If you think about what has happened to the fashion industry, they are one of the hardest hit industries right now. And Alice and Olivia CEO Stacey Bandett launched a job platform for creatives and artists to help serve as a gallery to show off projects, as well as a place for people to find opportunities. So those who are out of work, this is a forum for them to come and to be able to find those opportunities. Again, a brand trying to help, recognizing what people are going through right now. And there are some other examples like this, and we're going to continue to see that.
It is also, by the way, it's important to understand that, like, it's not just the messaging and content you create, but also, you know, as we start to kind of come back into the world and cities and towns start to reopen again, what you do in real life is also as important as what you do in your overall messaging. And you know, things like you know, what consumers will want and feel comfortable with in an in-store experience, and what and how consumers will feel confident to engage with a brand in real life, means you also have to show that you're taking the right actions, right? Things like having hand sanitizer present, things like, you know, actually the smell of disinfectant, right? Knowing that I'm walking into a clean environment. Those are going to be things that we're going to notice. Those are going to be things that we're going to want as we re-enter the world, and as we begin to kind of ease on our social distancing to some degree over time. This goes back to kind of the health comment I made earlier, is like, you know, not only are we reevaluating our health routines from an exercise standpoint, but we are more aware of hygiene now than I think certainly, you know, in my lifetime, the country is more aware of these factors. And I think as you start to open up your physical experiences, it's going to be as important. The next section is about creating with purpose. So now we're kind of getting into the weeds of, like, what should you be making and how you should be making it. So we're going to ask another question of our consumers and launch the fourth poll, I believe. What content do you want to see more of during COVID? These are going to be open-ended questions, so not multiple choice. We're going to see kind of the top words and word cloud that'll paint. What content do you want to see less of? What type of content is the most engaging? And which brands have created your favorite content so far? So vote for what you want to hear from consumers. And again, we will share the results at the end. So 51% of consumers agree that brands should remain an integral part of media, that media that distracts and entertains them, right? So slightly more than half of all consumers don't just want to kind of hear about the brands you're selling, but they want you to, like, distract them from the world. They want you to entertain them. They're consuming more content than ever from a number of different sources. You know, obviously the Netflixes and the Amazon Primes and the Hulus of the world have seen a major uptick in volume, but at the same time, there's opportunities for brands to create content, and the content that they create, you know, again, should have purpose. Because 71% of people said during this time, if they perceive a brand to put profits over people, they will lose trust forever, right? That's a pretty, that word forever it kind of gives you a little chills. It's like a, you know, you screw this up and it's game over, right? So this is a moment, right? This is the moment where your people stories that kind of tie back to the relevance of your brand are critically important for you to uncover and understand. And anytime I see, you know, consumer polling results that, you know, skew, you know, 65%, 75%, 80%, it's telling. Like, this is a huge moment for brands that could kind of make or break you.
Yeah, I think people are really going to remember how brands behave during this pandemic. So you literally have to wake up every day and think about, how do you want to be remembered and what are the actions that you're going to take? And this, to me, is one of the best examples of a brand that's really hurting right now, Hilton, because the hotel, tourism, hospitality industry has significantly been impacted. But they recognized that they had a relationship with their customer and they wanted to find a way to connect. And so for any of you who've been to a DoubleTree by Hilton, you know when you go and you check in, you are handed a warm, gooey chocolate chip cookie that everyone loves. And people have been trying to figure out the recipe for years, and there have been a lot of guesses around it, but Hilton decided that they would actually publish the recipe because they know that people were missing their cookies, that they weren't able to have that kind of connection, and they wanted to do something for people. And they know that a chocolate chip cookie can't solve everything, but maybe it could bring a little happiness. And we know that people are leaning into baking and cooking more during this time. So it was a really great way to connect with their customers. They've had over 250,000 people go and download the recipe. And back to Molly's earlier point, you got to weather the storm, and maybe you aren't going to be leaning into advertising right now, depending upon what category you're in, but you have to maintain a connection with your customers, especially when you see the numbers that Avi showed about loyalty. You need to make sure you are there.
So I really like this example as of one of a brand trying to stay connected to their consumer that also is trying to figure out new ways to bring their customer journey online, as well as providing a little quarantine time fun for their consumers. So this is from the Mondavi sisters of CK Mondavi Wines, and they created virtual educational tastings that they're doing online. And it's been a great way for them to connect, provide a little edutainment perhaps for their consumer, but giving them an opportunity to really demonstrate some, maybe not quite utility, but recognize the situation and still maintain those relationships and continue to build those connections with their consumers. And then obviously we saw a lot of brands starting to play with their logos as part of COVID. And so this is two examples of that, of brands using their logos to show the social distancing message as an attempt to really connect and show some solidarity with their consumer. And I think particularly in the case of McDonald's, we saw that this was a real misstep by the brand, and it demonstrated that they didn't really understand what consumers now expect from brands in times of crisis. And so they had tremendous amount of backlash against this because consumers didn't want platitudes. They didn't want symbols from a brand. What they wanted to see McDonald's do was change some of their paid sick leave policies to feed millions of people with meals, given how many people are currently living with food instability as a result of the crisis, to think about how could they retool their drive-thrus to become testing stations for COVID. So I think this is a really good example of a brand not understanding what is now what is the responsibility that a brand has to wear as part of being a good corporate citizen today.
It really is. It's not about you. It's about them, right? It's not about the brand. So anything that you want to talk about that is about yourself, just take a step back and understand that, now is not the time to be chest thumping in any way.
They want action.
Yeah, exactly right. So, the other thing to think about a little bit is like metrics for success, right? Like as you think about the content you create, you might want to reconsider, obviously, uptick in social media engagement, uptick in content consumption. So, start to think a little bit about, what winning looks like in a different context. And so some of the metrics are shifting, some of the metrics are changing. You can see kind of April versus March in just 1 month, the number of interactions per post are rising. So, people are out there, people are consuming, and you should hopefully, if you do it right, see the right kind of uptick. Because 76%, yet another big ass number, right? That says like people believe brands should continue to provide digital social experiences after the crisis is over, signaling a thirst for more content. So, again, if you do this right, this is a dividend, right? Going back to Rahm Emanuel, never let the good crisis go to waste, right? This is a moment in time that you can do things. It gives you the liberty to do things and try different opportunities to kind of engage and do it in a relevant way. And obviously you can just see by the numbers, like people want it, right? They need it, they're craving for it.
Yeah, and you see people really thinking through their business model, and this time period is just accelerating some change that was already going to happen. And this example reminds me, I think it was likely inspired by something that was happening in China. So KFC is fairly ubiquitous in China, and they recognized that people were a little concerned about the food prep. So what they did was they created meal kits so that people could prepare the food at home, right? So how do you start bundling? Well, PepsiCo also took that idea about bundle and looked at their products. And when you hear PepsiCo, you're immediately thinking of beverages. But the reality is they own a lot of products that are pantry products and snack foods. And so I'm sure a lot of people weren't even aware of this, but they decided to go to direct to consumer. And so if you also think about owning first party data and understanding who your customer is incredibly valuable. So I think this is a really smart play for them also, just to have a direct connection with that customer, which typically has been really challenging for packaged goods brands. But they found a clever way to kind of package this up. They have bundles called Rise and Shine, where they're putting together Quaker oatmeal and Tropicana shelf-stable juice. And then they have the Workout and Recovery, where they have muscle milk or bottles of Propel and Gatorade bars. You kind of see the theme coming together, and they're offering free shipping if you spend $15 or more. So there are a lot of people paying attention to this, and I think we're going to see a lot of copycats soon to follow.
Yeah, I mean, what a massive shift for, you know, one of the largest CPG brands on the planet to go direct to consumer, right? Talk about a paradigm shift. And, you know, if I'm a you know, grocery chain now, I'm kind of rethinking a little bit of stuff and reevaluating. So it just shows that, like, adding value, providing, you know, direct relationship is you know, what some of these brands are thinking about and doing it in an effective way. So as we kind of come to an end here, we're going to take a minute and kind of open up for questions in a second. I'm going to share the results from the Suzy questions that we answered. But just to kind of summarize, you know, take time to learn about your new consumer, because it's a new consumer, right? The paradigm is different. The personas that you've developed in the past, you know, are evolved. They're different. They're reframed. You know, you need to be able to also kind of teach consumers, not preach at consumers, right? Be able to add value. You know, that word value is a critical one. And actions do speak louder than words. I think, you know, when Molly was talking about the misstep for McDonald's, you know, I think that shows you kind of what consumers expect, right? McDonald's shouldn't be worried about their logo. They should be worried about how to feed more people that need food. They should be thinking about how to leverage their infrastructure to do incredible things for the world. And that's the expectation that people have on brands today, especially brands that have that kind of firepower, or I should say market cap, right? So those actions definitely speak louder than words. And then this is an opportunity to kind of reimagine your brand and your role with consumers, because, you know, lastly, you know, I've said it a couple of times, you have the opportunity to kind of do things that you've never been able to do before. And if, you know, you're not taking advantage of it now, you're going to get ultimately left behind, and someone else is going to step into that void and take that opportunity from you. And so, you know, now is a unique moment in time that I don't think, certainly in my life, I've never seen anything like this, a paradigm shift of this magnitude. You know, 9/11 was the last big paradigm shift I experienced as a New Yorker. This takes on a whole different life and is kind of globally connecting all of us in a way that nothing has ever done. So take a minute there, you know, start thinking about some questions that you want us to answer. We'll do some Q&A in a moment. But before that, let me see if I do this appropriately. I should be able to just click the results button and it will take me to Suzy. Hopefully you still see my screen. I'm going to go into my action list here, so you're getting a real life kind of tour of our platform. And Abel, my co-producer here, has populated the final questions that you've wanted us to ask. So we'll just kind of go one at a time. How much has COVID-19 changed your daily buying habits? Let's take a quick look at the results here. Let's see, we asked 500 people. It has changed moderately, very much, or extremely. So obviously, you know, 34, 26, 19, you know, these are numbers that are relatively high. So you can see the majority of people are saying that their daily habits, their daily buying habits have been, you know, either very changed, moderately changed, or extremely changed. Okay. The next question you wanted us to ask is, what information do you want most from brands? Let's take a look at those results. Okay. What information do you want most from brands? What they are doing to adapt, where to find them, where and how else they're helping, information about other things in the brand, and information about COVID-19. So, this idea of like, what are they doing to adapt, right? 35% of people want to know from brands, what are you doing right now? How are you acting differently, right? That's, again, it's showing that they're expecting you to change your behavior in the same way that they are changing their behavior. The next question you wanted us to ask is, what brands in particular have done a good job with their actions during COVID-19? I believe this is an open-ended response, so we're going to see a word cloud, which I'll show you here. So what brands in particular have done a good job? We're seeing Amazon, Walmart, Starbucks, Chipotle, McDonald's, and we'll share the results of this with everybody as well, so you can kind of see. Here are some interesting verbatims. REI has offered more sales and free shipping, which has been really nice. Apple and Google, 3M, Kimberly Clark has been a great leader. I appreciate the messaging from Pampers, Instacart, Postmates, Chick-fil-A. So people are noticing what certain brands are doing, and it's starting to resonate with them. Lastly, during COVID-19, what type of content is the most engaging and why? Also an open-ended question. What type of content is most engaging? Video content, movies, YouTube, a lot of YouTube watching. Actually, we've seen that quite a bit. News, funny, right? They want some comedy. They want you to help, right? And if we go down into some of these verbatims, I've been enjoying watching my favorite YouTube channels and have been particularly interested in vlog style videos. I love a good feel-good story, good and positive stories. The news is interesting because one knows more about the virus. Again, I'm just picking these at random. These just came in. So, Netflix and streaming videos, sketch comedy, TV shows because I can binge watch. So lots of people doing lots of different things in terms of what content they're engaging with and why. So again, we'll share these results along with the deck and the presentation with everybody. And for now, I'll go back here to the deck and just plug the hub one more time. So, this content's going to be posted there as well. All the research that we are conducting on a daily basis will get posted here. So if you want to stay up to the minute, feel free to sign up for the newsletter and check us out at suzy.com/COVID. You can always reach out to me with any direct questions. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully that will allow you to see our faces. And we can take some questions from the audience if there are some. Let me open up the
There
Q&A.
are a lot of them.
Awesome. Cool. So let's just kind of, tackle them one at a time. Rosie says, do you think this is leveling the B2B, B2C experience and how brands connect and get their customers to respond? You guys want to take that? You want me to take that? Happy to kind of moderate here.
I suppose it's leveling the playing field in that B2C brands are finding ways to go direct to consumer. So it's still coming back to, there is that end user that you still have to connect with. So you're able to probably cut out the middleman a little bit more than you had in the past.
Yeah. I would say too, the one thing that often is forgotten is even B2B marketing, you're still talking to people, right? You're still interacting with other folks. Suzy's a perfect example. We're marketing in a B2B way. Our customers are Fortune, 500 brands. And we are sitting here trying to add value in the best way we can. We're doing 1 to 2 webinars a week and trying to help folks through this crisis in the best way that we possibly can. And at the other end of this Zoom are, 222 people who are also affected by this crisis. And if we can help any one of them, we've done a good thing here. Ebony asked, do you see advertisers spending with news outlets and magazines, whether online and print, over the next coming months? It appears many outlets are laying off and many don't believe they'll be receiving ads again soon. That's a great question in terms of like, what is in store in the future of like, ad buying and media placements?
Yeah, we know that ad spending is down right now, although CPMs are also down. So costs are fairly advantageous. But you've got certain categories that have had to go dark or really minimize their spend. And you have others that are figuring out what is the right motivation. And you have a few brands, not a lot, but you have some that are actually increasing their spend because they're incredibly relevant right now. So the prediction, depending upon how long this goes, is that you'll start to see some of that coming back in Q3 and hopefully by Q4, but there's definitely still some questions depending upon the economic impact that this has had to the bottom line.
Yeah, yeah. Holland asked, would love to know how as a brand we can use these methods while being under such restricted production capabilities. Holland, I don't know what restrictions in terms of production you're faced with, but in terms of how you can leverage these methods, I think it's about finding a natural point of engagement that makes your brand relevant and authentic. I'll go back to what McDonald's should have done instead of what they did do, right? They have an infrastructure they can leverage. They have opportunities to help. Suzy is another example. We have a research tool. We basically made it free for a number of small businesses. We're trying to figure out how to kind of, again, what is the value that you can create as a brand, and what opportunity you have to create value, and then lean into that as a form of content, as a form of giving back. I mean, that would be my 2 cents. I don't know if Molly or Marla, you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I would add, and if her question is kind of specific to advertising production and the quality, I mean, I think we're in a unique point in time where everybody from that standpoint is kind of in the same boat. And so people's expectation of the level of finish and polish on production isn't what it would be during normal times. There's obviously a lot more forgiveness, and in some ways a lot more appreciation for the authenticity of the communications that are coming out now. People actually look the way they look now. Yeah. As a result of this, so sometimes to everybody's surprise, but so I think everybody's giving people a little bit of slack in that regard, and so I wouldn't let perfection be the enemy of doing the right thing.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're all used to pixelated videos and shaky phone videos, and I think consumers are okay with that, and I think they're kind of used to that at this point. So don't let the polish of a professionally produced spot get in the way of creating some authentic content. And in fact, I would argue that the less polished it is, the more authentic it is, right?
Exactly.
And I think that actually serves you in that regard. So next question, how can agencies better serve their clients during these uncertain times? I'm gonna let you guys take that as the agency helmers.
Sure. I think agencies can do what they've always done, which is help their clients really solve the most complex business challenges and business problems through creativity. And right now, in somewhat of a positive way, what this crisis has done is it's elevated the conversation to not being about the minutia, but about what is most critical and important right now. And they've been able to cut through the decision-making and the hierarchy and get right to the top and have real conversations. And that's been incredibly positive, because what these brands are dealing with, they've never dealt with before. And so in many ways, people are figuring it out together. But what agencies need to do is be proactive about ideas. Don't sit back and wait for your client to come to you. Think about what the situation is, look at what's going on in the world, and think about how that brand can be more useful and helpful.
Yeah, I think to that point, I mean, just, you've even seen some of the suggestions through the examples we've given. So, agencies can help their brands think about how can they take the assets that they already have and reimagine how those could be deployed to some sort of beneficial service to their consumers. Something, as we talked about, brands that are helping other brands that are going to be remembered when we're through all of this. Additionally, a lot of brands were caught off guard and ill-prepared to see their entire customer journey go digital. And that's a place where agencies can really help them to either transfer the experience as well as make sure that friction is being taken out of that experience. Because as we all know, we're under additional stress that we've never had to go through before. Consumers finding additional stress and trying to engage with brands is just something that they don't need. And then lastly, I think, it's so easy to get caught up in the here and now and thinking about what do we do today, and brands really need to start thinking about what are they going to do post-COVID or through whatever the next new normal is going to be. And that's a place where agencies can really help their clients to scenario plan and start to think about what does recovery look like, or if recovery isn't a nice V the way we all hope it's going to be, but it's more of a W or an L or some other letter of the alphabet, really helping them to scenario play what those, what the impact of that is going to be on their business and how they can react and best support their customers through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and actually leads right into the next question, which is, how do I plan for the future during these times, especially for brands that are already working on campaigns for fall 2020 or 2021? And I think, you know, so what you just said is spot on. You know, I think you got to look at where the trends are, you know, where people are consuming content and the behaviors that they're displaying, and figure out how you can naturally insert yourselves in those moments. You know, I'll say for us, you know, we've been a kind of, up until this point, very heavy on like live events and personal interactions, and that just kind of completely went away. You know, I think we're hoping that that starts to resurface in 2021, but you know, we've moved, you know, 100% of our efforts to digital, and we're recalibrating everything we're doing in the form of content like this. And so I think as you start to look at end of 2020 going into 2021, you know, some of these behavioral changes that we talked about today are they're going to persist, and they're going to be the new normal for a little while.
Definitely.
Okay, as a struggling brand during COVID, how do I decide if advertising is worth the money for me? That's a pretty good question.
Well, I would say you have to decide what kind of relationship you want to have with your customer. And so look at your competitive set, and if you can look at every economic downturn going back to the Depression. Any brand that ceded their share of voice to another competitor has had a very hard time getting that back, or if at all. So the example that a lot of people are sharing right now is Post and Kellogg's cereal. Post decided to step back. Kellogg came in and sustained that, and has never been, Post has never really recovered from that. But we know brands that take a break during an economic downturn, it can take them up to 5 years to recover that brand equity. So I would think about who you are within your competitive set, and don't look at it as a cost. You need to look at it as an investment, and don't focus on the short term. You need to focus on the long term. And I think that's one of the big challenges that many brands have, especially those where you've got a CFO breathing down your neck. You really have to make sure that you can show the value and the return, and don't just focus on the short term. And I know that's not always easy to say or to prove.
Your point about market share, I think, it is also, it just is spot on, right? I mean, you know, you don't want to put your balance sheet in harm's way, and you need to make sure that you can live to fight another day. But at the same time, you know, you have to stay relevant, and you have to stay top of mind. Otherwise, you will disappear, right? And somebody else is going to step into that void. So I think at least, you know, what we're trying to do as well is put our foot on the gas. Just when you think it, you know, it's like, what's another quote? Warren Buffett says, like, when everybody's running out of the building, that's when I'm running into the building.
Yes.
And I think that's the truth. And again, you know, you don't want to put your balance sheet in harm's way. And I know it's easier said than done to write that check to buy media and put yourself out there. But if you can frame it in the right way with the right message, it certainly will, I believe, pay dividends, you know, to come in the future. Let's see, Jeff asked, oh, interesting. Okay, have you done any work around how the consumer feels and thinks behind these data points that might relate to the nonprofit world? They may not be, for example, selling anything, but they still need to fundraise. I think that's a really unique challenge, you know, as you know, for nonprofits today. Love to kind of hear your thoughts on that. If you're a nonprofit, what are you thinking about right now?
I mean, this is an area where nonprofits are looking to make sure that people want to still contribute, because you see what's going on. But what I've seen is people are donating, people are contributing, and they want to still do that. Nonprofits are still brands, and they still need to maintain that relevancy, and they need to really share what the funds are going to, how they're being used, and thinking a little bit differently. The real hit for a lot of nonprofits has been that many of them rely on an annual gala or fundraiser that typically takes place in person, and they haven't been able to do that. So they're thinking about how you can replicate it. And the most recent example was the Robin Hood Foundation that usually has a huge gala in New York, black tie affair. They ended up converting that, and Tina Fey hosted it, and they raised over $150 million. So there is still an opportunity there, but you have to think a little bit differently about that experience in the way you're going to connect.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, one other thing I'll kind of throw in there, which might work for some and not for others, but kind of co-marketing opportunities. I've seen a lot of nonprofits kind of band together to form coalitions. I've seen nonprofits kind of connect with mainstream brands to offer something unique of value and leverage their message that way. So, you know, I always tend to say, like, you know, success comes oftentimes through other people's audiences. And so if you can kind of connect to audiences through other partners, that's oftentimes a really good way to do it. I mean, a point in case right here, Suzy and the 4As coming together to add value, you know, collaboratively is a perfect example of that, I think.
Yeah, we're thrilled with our partnership with you. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's been, you know, a personal relationship for years, even that kind of predated my time with Suzy. So I'm super excited to kind of continue it and again, try to add value, right?
Same here.
So, you know, we're definitely over here in terms of time. I want to be respectful, but we still have, you know, over, you know, 125 people on. So if you guys are cool with it, I'm happy to keep answering questions.
I can go for about another 5 minutes. Let's keep going.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So let's see. So we answered the nonprofit question. Matt asked question for Avi. A lot of people are talking about consumer behaviors fundamentally changing post-pandemic. Can you be more specific about what behaviors you expect to change fundamentally and forever? Wow, that's a big question. You know, I think it's important to kind of look at some of the things we're looking at now. I think we're realizing that we're able to do things remotely that we used to do in person, and that may, you know, change the way we interact. Remote working is going to be here for a long time now. You're seeing a lot of companies kind of rethinking whether or not they even need office space. I think we're realizing now that, you know, we're capable of doing things that we weren't able to do before. We're taking fitness classes online. You know, you know, I've attended a, you know, Zoom bat mitzvah, and not that I'm suggesting that that's going to be a permanent change, but I think what is happening is, in a lot of ways, by being socially distant, we're also interacting with people that we've never interacted with before, and borders are disappearing, right? Folks that I haven't talked to in a long time, I'm now interacting with because I'm on Zoom all day long. So I think some of those interactions are important. Obviously, I think, you know, travel and hospitality is going to take a little bit of time to recover, but I do think, you know, the way we travel is going to fundamentally change in some respects. I think, you know, the way we think about some of the products and services that we buy and where we spend our money, I think we're going to start to look at differently. So, you know, I don't know, you know, if that answers your question, but, you know, again, if you look through some of the data and the statistics, you know, you can see some of the themes that we talked about here today, from our, you know, health and fitness to our wanting to connect more with, you know, kind of sustainable brands or socially conscious brands, things of that nature. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
No, I agree.
Okay. Let's see. Kendall, you mentioned there are some brands who do not have budget or feel that they are able to position themselves in all the ways you spoke of. We are 75% B2B. Any advice for us marketers in this bucket? I think we kind of addressed some of that in the past, but I think it begs to say, just stay relevant, stay top of mind. Know that even though you're a B2B brand, you're still connecting with people on the other end of the you know, the phone line or Zoom line or whatever. And let's see. Cornell asked, are brands ready to engage with consumers on direct digital channels? I'm not sure, kind of, Cornell, what you mean by that, but if the PepsiCo example is anything, I think the answer is yes. I think the pattern and the trend has always been kind of going in that direction. You know, direct to consumer has been a big move over the last few years. You know, with brands like Warby Parker, you know, brands like Away. These are brands that have kind of come up in the direct-to-consumer world that now actually may start to see a hit in some respects. You know, when you have some of these incumbent brands now being kind of thrown into the deep end and forced to create direct relationships with brands, right? I think those kind of upstarts that came out in the D2C world, I think they should be a little scared, just a teeny bit, because once the big boys start to kind of throw money in a direct-to-consumer way, you're going to start to see paradigm shifts a little bit. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on kind of D2C or where the world of D2C is going to head.
No, I agree with that, but people have already had direct relationships with brands. I'll use Sephora as an example. You already could order directly with Sephora. There are a number of brands out there that people have relationships with either through the app or just direct through brick and mortar, and how they've managed that. So what this experience has done is it's accelerated the digital and e-com. And so you're just going to have more people shifting to the convenience aspect of it and recognizing that it is a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. All right, well, it is 2:15, and we've pretty much gone through most of the questions in the queue. So I think it's probably a good time to say thank you to Molly, to Marla, to all the folks behind the scenes, on Slack channels and chat rooms that have kind of helped put this together, and all the folks behind the scenes who helped kind of pull this research together. So really appreciate everybody's time. Please stay safe and sane. And remember that, now is an opportunity if you have the ability to kind of connect directly. Any final words from you guys before we sign off?
No, thank you, and stay healthy, everyone.
Awesome. Perfect.
Thanks, Avi.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.